joined us this evening. My name is Meg. It's not Nancy K. That's our admin. That's the name that's assigned to our account. My name is Meg. I am the marketing manager for Roasty Rollers, if we have never met yet. And I'm joined tonight by the lovely sMush and Doof, who are both skaters and officials for Roasty Rollers. They're going to be covering a couple of different topics about some fun information about NSOing, kind of the magic that happens in the background with stats and tracking various things that go on during games. We're going to have the chat session open here, so if you have something that you want to say, you can totally say it there. What I would ask is that if you have a question, you can throw it into the Q&A section, which is down below. So if you don't see that, you can hover your mouse over the window here, and you should see two little speech bubbles with Q&A. You can throw your questions in there. Another fun thing about that is if you like a question or if you have the same question, you can upvote it, give it a thumbs up. I'll pop it to the top of the feed, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end of the session today to answer all of your inquiries. But I will give it away for these folks who are going to tell us all about the fun stuff we're going to learn.
All right, yay. So I am going to start sharing my screen so we can get into a PowerPoint, and then Doof is going to guide us through kind of the first part of this. So here we go. All right, can everyone see that all right? I say without being able to see the chat. All right.
Oh, let's see. Yes. Others say it looks good. Great. Here we go. So we're going to start off with talking about scorekeeping. The scorekeepers are always going to be paired up with one jam ref, and they're going to stay with that ref for the whole game. But then they do switch at the half, which gives a complete fairness for both teams. The scorekeeper is going to be the person who's tracking the jammer number and each jam, and then also however many points that the jammer is awarded for each scoring pass. They also track other important information such as call-offs, Surpasses, and if a jam is called for injury, which hopefully that doesn't happen, but it does. This is a digital copy of what the scorekeeping paperwork looks like. In the first column is going to be what jam number it is, and the second column is going to be the jammer's number. So you might be going into jam 2, but the jammer's number is going to be 1-4. The next columns is going to be if in the order of what it is. It's going to be either if they lost lead, if they lost the eligibility to get lead, if they have lead, if they called off the jam, if the jam was called off for injury, or if there's a no initial pass on that one. And with those columns, you're always going to put on a check mark or an X within the box. And then the following trips that is labeled under trip 2 through 10, those are going to be each of the scoring passes that the jammer takes. And then at the end, we have the jam total, and then the next column is going to be the overall game total there.
All right, and before we go on a little bit more, I was supposed to ask this at the beginning too, so I'm sorry I forgot. If you could put in the chat kind of what your experience is, specifically with scorekeeping. So we're going to talk about scorekeeping and box timing today, but right now, how experienced you are with the idea of scorekeeping, because we're gearing this toward people who maybe don't have as much experience, but if everyone here is very familiar, then maybe we can cover some more advanced stuff. So it looks like Disco has raised her hand. I don't know how to, Meg, can you help with seeing what Disco's question is?
Sure. Disco, I think if you have a question, do you want to just type it into the chat or into the Q&A section down there, and we can get that answered for you?
Perfect.
Oh, no questions.
Yeah, I do see in the Q&A spot that there is question from Ashley of like, how do you measure when a trip starts and ends? So that's going to be, the trip is going to start, or trip 2 is going to be started from when, as soon as the jammer has gone out of the pack and is on their, and out of their like initial scoring, or yeah, out of their initial pass. So as soon as they are out of the pack, they're lead or they're not lead, then as soon as the jammer comes back up to the pack, that's going to be their first scoring trip. So that's going to be under trip 2. And then as soon as they exit the pack again, then they're going to be starting their their next trip there.
Yeah, and just to get a little bit more maybe technical with it, it's based on when they leave the engagement zone. So when the jammer is going through on their initial, they may pass everyone, but once they've exited the engagement zone, they've now begun their second trip, which is their first scoring trip. And we use the terminology trips instead of passes just because it passing can mean a lot of different things. That's why the paperwork now says trips. All right, so this is kind of in the abstract what it looks like. Do you guys y'all wanna see what it looks like filled in, I imagine? So take us there.
So this is just a digital copy of what it looks like normally it's going to be handwritten in, but this is straight from one of our stats books. As you can see on the first column, it's going to be the jam numbers. But then if you see underneath the 12 that there is a little SP and asterisk there, that means that it has been a star pass. With the asterisk, that means that is not your star pass though. So it's going to be the other teams. With all paperwork, with all but the penalty box paperwork, we're always going to be marking down all the star passes. It doesn't matter if it's for your team or not. Oh gosh, where did it go? There's another thing in my way. Oh my gosh, sorry. Yeah, so you're always going to be marking if it is going to be a star pass or not. And it looks like that our version of star pass is cut off maybe. But it's going to be very similar to how the star passes looks with the asterisks, except it's not going to have the asterisks on it. So it's just going to say SP in the box, and then the new jammer's number, aka the pivots number, is going to be in that box there.
All right, and I think that it is towards the bottom of my screen. I'm able to see it, but yeah, I think people can imagine if they can't see it on their versions that there's not the little star there. So Doof, do you want us to take us through maybe one of these particular lines and just kind of show what each of those things mean? Or
yeah, let's go to jam number 8, and then we also move all the faces over here. So in jam number 8, we have jammer number 700. It looks like that they got lead and that they have called off the jam according to what these X's mean inside the little columns there. And then it looks like that for 3 scoring trips, they got all 4 points of the blockers, and then on their 4th scoring trip or their 5th trip around, that they only got 2 points there, and they called off the jam. So at the end of that jam total, we have 14 points, but then their overall game total ended up being 29 points at the end there.
all right, great. And I think if folks have any questions about that, that would be a good thing to kind of put up, because Doof just led us through kind of exactly what happens over the course of the jam.
So it looks like we have one question that is, can you talk about where to note points with a star pass?
Yeah, so that one, I guess, a little tricky because it depends on if the original jammer has gotten some points themselves or not. In most cases, which it doesn't show on ours, in most cases that the original jammer is still on their initial pass. So they would have a no initial check or X marked in the far, oh my gosh, what is that? That the 7th column in, and then on the line below, like with where you would mark the star pass, when the new jammer, aka pivot, goes around and has gone some points, then you would be marking their points down in the trip 2 box. However, it does change if the original jammer has gone some points themselves, in which case then the points would go in whichever scoring pass it would be, or yeah, whichever trip it would be in. So if the original jammer has gone, let's see, if the original jammer has gone through like 2 scoring trips and then they decide to do a star pass, then the new jammer would be getting the points in trip 4, or in that column for trip 4.
And you could also have something where the original jammer gets 2 of the points in one of the trips in trip 4, and then the former pivot, now jammer, after the star pass, puts the cap on in the middle of that trip and is able to pass the other 2 blockers legally. Then you could potentially split those points that way too. That's not very common.
So I have kind of a silly question, maybe. I'm curious why, because any jammer could star pass to their pivot as long as they don't go to the box. Wait, no, that might be wrong.
There's some, but generally they can pass their pivot, sure.
So, but if that's the case, how come for this spreadsheet there isn't a star pass option underneath every number that would indicate the jammer could potentially pass the star to their pivot?
Okay.
So we'd only be marking down a star pass if one actually happens. Just so it doesn't clutter up the paper, because you can only have so many lines on the paper, and so we'd only mark them when they actually happen.
Yeah,
not just like a potential.
Yeah, and to add on to that, when you're filling this out as a scorekeeper, you're going one line at a time. So none of these are pre-filled. So the jam number, you're writing it down each time, and you're not pre-filling it because you don't want to go a jam ahead, because there could be a star pass in that jam, and then your lines would look different because you'd have to add that line for a star pass. And something that's very important as you're getting more advanced and proficient with NSOing and paperwork is making sure that those star passes all kind of align, because when this gets entered in a stats book, you can't really have those discrepancies. So that's why you record not just when your team has a star pass, but also when the other team has a star pass. So as you can imagine, you as a scorekeeper, you're focused on the one team. There's very little things that the other team does that affects what you put down in your paperwork. But star pass is one of those things you need to make sure, regardless of the team that does it, it gets down the paperwork.
That is very smart. And for some reason, I never knew that these spreadsheets were not pre-filled out. So that makes plenty of sense.
Yeah, so also when you are filling out the paperwork, in order to sign, in case you do have a star pass, so you're not hunting down for what the pivot's number is, something that you could do, you can always write the pivot's number on the side of the column where it says jam. Sign is not in its own box per se, but it's just like right next to it on that line, so you have that information at the ready. Sign if there is a star pass and you're like, oh, here's the new jammer's number.
Awesome. And someone else asked, what are the columns between jammer number and trip number 2? So I think it might just be a little bit hard to read there. Can you reiterate those?
Sure, I'm going to go back a slide for that.
Yeah. Oh, no, I have to move the faces again. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, so right after the jammer's number, we have the lost column, which that means like if they lost the eligibility to get lead, or if they lost lead themselves. So if they committed a penalty, or if they took off the cap. I think that's it from the lost lead part. And then the next column over is going to be lead. So that one's going to be if they were awarded the lead jammer. The next column is going to be a call. So that means when they've called off when the jammer themselves has called off the jam. The next one over is going to be injury. So that one is if the jam is called for injury. And that's normally going to be if someone is down and they haven't gone back up, or there's just some other reason that we would need to call it. So we'd be marking it off in the injury column. And then the last one is going to be the no initial. So if the jammer never got out of the pack, or if they never got out of the pack, or they did a star pass, then we'd be marking off the no initial if they're still on their initial pass there.
Yeah, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a little bit. So hello again. So I can just kind of demonstrate some of the ref signals that you would be seeing as a scorekeeper. So there's some non-standardized signals that we use, but to kind of start more with what you will consistently see is your jam ref is signaling points, and it's the jammer gets out, passes everyone. It's often 4, but it's not always 4, and often if it's called off while the jammer is still in the middle of the pack, it's may not be 4. So it seems silly, but the different ways people do numbers can sometimes make a difference. And when you're scorekeeping, at least in our venue particularly, because in the mezzanine you're a little high up, it's a little further away, it's a good idea to go to check in with your jam ref and to ask how they see how they do their numbers. It's really just usually going to be 1, 2, 3, or 3 and 4. Some people do 0 or 0. And then some other things to ask that's an important one is what their signal is for a no initial pass. And again, that's when you check that box. So sometimes, for instance, a jammer could get lead immediately recycled, never actually left the engagement zone, and so they're both lead and no initial. So things like that, you have to kind of check in with what the ref's signaling, especially since they're better able to gauge that with their position on the track. There's not a standard for what no initial is. A common one we see at Rose is we'll do this. It kind of requires that you make eye contact with your scorekeepers. You have to see the jam ref do this because they're not generally going to be doing this the whole time. Another one that you'll see fairly common is just kind of like a subtle back and forth with the raised fist for no initial. Another non-standardized one that we see in this region fairly frequently is kind of doing for injury, just doing this, but they'll be, they're also, well, we won't talk about timeouts and how that works with it too, but there might be some other signals for that one. Do you think I missed any other hand signals?
Start pass.
Oh, start pass. That's an important one and a standardized one. I'm going to go down here. So that's just a start pass. You can't see my hand; it disappears because of my cool background. But that is very important again because of making the paperwork line up. Sometimes it happens unexpectedly or at the end of the jam, and just making sure you echo it back to your jam ref, and there'll be some variations perhaps with your venue or your league or your head officials for how they exactly want to handle that. And maybe Doof, you can talk more about kind of how you prefer seeing that echoing with the star pass.
I mean, just as long as you're echoing it back to the jam ref, and the jam ref should be confirming with also at the end of the jam, if there was one that they could be like, yes, 4 points, also a star pass. So we just want to make sure that our scorekeepers are also mirroring whatever the jam refs are doing, just so then everyone's on the same page.
And now that I can see the chat, since I'm not screen sharing, Mass had another common one, which is for the no initial is putting it under your fist under your chin. So that's another one you might see. And we do want you to put the Q&As, your questions in the Q&A feature, just because we're not monitoring the chat quite as much. But I did also see this one from Gopher about venues restrictions, and depending on where your jammers are lining up, you may not be able to see their back numbers. Arm numbers sometimes can become important, but if you're far away, it can be hard to see. And there's just some venues where you're on the opposite side of the track from where everyone's lining up in a way where you just aren't going to see any numbers. Maybe you can get the pivot number if they're rear facing, and that's about it. So what, again, checking with your jam ref if you know those sort of venue restrictions about how they're going to signal the numbers. One common way that I'll see is not using sign language, but it's doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh no, the jammer number starts with what we had, a 7. So then going sideways for 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's one way. So we had we were covering a jam where the jammer number was 700. So you do like this, 0, 0, and just kind of check, and the jammer will be signaling that, and sometimes hopefully checking in with you, but the way they're lined up, they also might not be able to. So if that doesn't happen, you can still collect the jammer number when the jam's going on. Not ideal, but it's not, you can still get it down, especially as you're starting to learn and practice and doing things at scrimmages. Doof, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, but I think that's it. Let me scroll through the chat to make sure there's no other questions in there. And I see that some people are already answering some questions for anyone who may have jumped in late. It looks great.
Oh, Kat has a good question.
Yeah, so the question here from Kat is about communication with the scoreboard operator. So scorekeepers are going to be working with the scoreboard operator. You should be on the side of whichever your team is lined up on the scoreboard, or at least on their computer view of it. And you should be saying jammer number is 700, and here's the pivots number. And then for each scoring pass, you should be saying, let's see, what was that? Was it black on that?
Yes, we had black.
Okay, yeah, so it should be black +4 or white +4, but be making sure that you're coming for just your team, just so you're not accidentally not giving the scoreboard operator miscommunication on there, and that they end up putting points in the wrong spot.
Right. So the scoreboard operator often, there's a series for what happens. They start the jam by generally pressing a button, clicking a mouse. The next thing that generally happens is there's going to be lead awarded. So their fingers might be hovering over either team lead, because each key may have a hotkey for which team's lead. So, or using their mouse. And if they're used to having black on one side, and then they hear lead on this side, but it's actually for the white team, they might press the wrong button. And a general rule that I kind of go by is, anytime as a scorekeeper I'm putting something down on my paper, I'm communicating that to the scoreboard operator. So if I say lead, I'm checking the lead box, I'm saying it out loud. The scoreboard operator is putting that on the scoreboard. So what Doof was talking about with telling the scoreboard operator the jammer numbers and for your team, the jammer number and pivot number, is because the rosters are loaded into the scoreboard, and so the scoreboard operator will be able to drop down, find that number, and then that's why when you start a jam, you have skaters' names up on the scoreboard if that's the display that's happening. And that only happens if you can get that information in, and ideally you have it by the start, so it can be up at the start. Now you just have to click accord. I don't know. I'm going to admit that I have not played around with 4.0 on the scoreboard. So Doof, I'm
Yes,
deferring.
it's now like just the button with like the entire roster. There
It does,
like
it does the
click it.
paperwork for you is my understanding. I don't
Yes. Yeah. It's time to be alive here.
Yeah, so that's the idea. Like the things that you are doing as a scorekeeper are being reflected on the scoreboard. Even when your jammer completes their initial trip, we're not going to talk about the dot method today that Wheels came up with, but you know, there's a little notation you can do on your paperwork when someone exits, just to make sure that you're getting all of the points and tracking the trips correctly. And so just saying, you know, out from initial, completed initial, something along that's succinct, will allow the scoreboard operator to be aware that, oh, the other jammer's out. What might that mean? Well, the first lead jammer might be calling it off soon, and so they could be a little bit more prepared for, you know, a call off like that, for instance. So it's just that kind of communication up there, not unnecessary communication, but that all, you know, communication based on what you're putting on your paperwork is generally going to be good to share with at least the scoreboard operator. All right, so do we have anything else for scorekeeping or any other questions for scorekeeping before we move on to box timing? All right, we'll maybe give it a little bit more time. In the meantime, can you all in the chat throw up kind of what your experience is with penalty box timing? So we're just talking about the box timers, not box managing. Maybe you've done it at a scrimmage a handful of times to help out. Maybe you've never done paperwork. Just kind of let us know how experienced you are with that. Great, totally new. I will say, does everyone know the general length of a penalty? I'm going to use that to gauge. We all know that penalties are generally 30 seconds long. Some exceptions for jammers. Sometimes you get multiple. Oh, cool. I'm just reading all your responses. It's great. Yay. Gonna assume Catherine's joking, but I don't know.
Oh no.
Oh, that sounds scary. Okay, I am going to start sharing my screen again and let Doof talk a little bit more about box timing once I get to there.
All right, so box timing, there is going to be a designated area for where the skaters who commit a penalty will go to. There's always going to be, there's a total of 3 chairs per team in that area, but 2 of the chairs are going to be for jammers only. So so even if if the other 2 chairs are occupied, another blocker cannot go into that spot. So the penalty box timers are going to be timing the skaters as they sit in the penalty box area, and timing starts as soon as the skater sits in any seat, and then we just have to tell them to move to a spot where you would like them in.
Okay, so Doof, if I'm on the black team and I sit in the white team's chair, when does my time start? When I move? When I sit?
As soon as you sit, and then we just tell you, please move over here, white 444 or black 444.
Okay.
And then the penalty box timer is going to be tracking all the paperwork, tracking all the information on the paperwork for the one team. So that's going to include that's going to be the blockers, the pivots, and the jammers. But the box timers are not going to be worried about timing the jammers, because that will be what the box managers will be doing. And then they also help keep track of how many penalties any skater has for the particular team that they are tracking.
All right.
All right, so with with the penalty box paperwork, the far right side where it says total penalties, that part is going to be already pre-filled with the roster numbers. So we're having to sign all the numbers are in correct order of how we like having them in. So going by the columns from the far left, it's going to be whichever period. It's either going to be 1 or 2. And then the next column over is going to be which jam number. And then the next column over is going to be in between, or it's going to be between jams. And that one means if they got a penalty at, let's see, in jam, looks like in jam 9, looks like that they were assessed a penalty in jam 8, and they didn't get to the box quite by the end of the jam ending, so they end up starting their penalty at the beginning of jam 9. So you'll be putting like a little X inside that column there. I saw something flashing there for a moment there. The next column over is going to be the team. So it's going to be either what color of team you're going to be doing. You just have to do like what the initial is on there. Then the next column over is going to be the skater number. So that's where you're going to write their number, so you're able to keep track of however many penalties that they have. Then we have which position. So that's either going to be a blocker, pivot, or jammer. And then we have when they came in at. So most of the time it's going to be at 0 seconds. But you can time multiple people using one stopwatch. So as we can see in jam 2, we have black 2-0 and black 5-1-5 coming in, only 1 second apart. So you can still use that for timing both of them at the same time and just making the note of that they came in just 1 second apart.
Yeah, and so this, unlike the scorekeeping paperwork, you'll see that if you're looking at the jam numbers, you'll see, okay, well, there were penalties in the first 3 jams, but you're not recording every single jam. You only record something when one of the color you're assigned to, shows up into the penalty box. So if nothing happens in the jam, you're not necessarily putting anything on your paperwork. There are these jam numbers you can track yourself if you wanted to, but there's really not anything to do unless there's someone coming to the box or leaving the box.
So on this, I'm just curious, generally speaking, there's one person who would be recording this and another person who would be managing the stopwatch, yeah?
So no, so this will be, the person who's doing the paperwork is the penalty box timer, and there's 2, 1 for each team. So this is the black team paperwork here. So this person is recording all of the black penalties for blocker, pivot, jammer, all of them, and they are also timing for all the blockers. So they're just not timing the jammers. That's the box manager will time the jammers. Generally, and this can vary a little bit, the box manager is probably the one like directing the person to the right seat and trying to give the box timers as much information as they can before that skater gets into the box, so you can start pre-filling some of this information. But the box timer, they're timing and they're doing all the paperwork for a team, and they're only just for timing though, they're just timing the blockers, which includes pivots.
You have to be very good at multitasking, I would imagine.
It can get it can get very hectic in a box. Sometimes most people, when you get more experienced with box timing, you're probably just going to be using one stopwatch, although that folks tend to have in the box an extra stopwatch somewhere on them just in case something happens. And when you're first starting, your box manager can help pick up the slack there too. But sometimes I'll just ask folks who seems like their box is very busy and overlapping, how high their stopwatch got, because they start it, and if it's never actually empty, they don't stop it. And so sometimes you'll get over 2 minutes, and that's one indication that person was very, very busy. And then do you want to talk about kind of penalty counts and how you interact with some of the other NSOs around that?
Yeah, so each time that a skater goes into the box and you got all their information written down here, you're also gonna be doing like a little tally over on the far right side where it says total penalties, and you're just gonna do like a little tally underneath their number. Just so you're able to just quickly look over and not having to go through like the entire paperwork, like, okay, this one has 1, 2, 3 penalties or whatever. So this just helps us make it sign it's like easier to see, so we can communicate to our penalty line of trackers, who are going to be then confirming however many penalties a person has. Each box manager has a different way of how they want to do that. Sometimes they want their box timers to be signaling to the penalty line of trackers, or sometimes they'll just want to be like confirm it with the box manager side, and they can then mirror it. But most of the time we'll start like giving like we'll warn the skater that they're at 5 penalties, and we'll also mirror it to the penalty line of trackers who are going to be inside the middle of saying like they have 5 penalties, or they're on their 6th penalty, or they've gone their 7th penalty and they've fouled out, in which case we will give them, the skaters, a warning being like, you're on your 5th, 6th, and 7th penalty.
Yeah, and as a box timer, keeping track of all that is also important, but your box manager is going to be the one who's going to handle kind of the foul out situations. So, it's not something you need to necessarily worry about when you're first getting started. Just be aware that as long as you're communicating the penalties, and when someone's getting up there, you make sure you communicate either to the box manager or to your penalty trackers on the inside, however your head official or box manager wants you to handle that.
Yeah, and I think I saw something else about, let's see. Sometimes skaters will come in with multiple penalties, and then your penalty line of tracker should be signaling it to either the timer or the box manager to let them know. And just we want to be able to confirm. So you'll see people in the middle will be going like tapping the wrist for however many penalties that they'll have, and we'll be making a very clear sign that we're making sure that we're timing them for the right, and we're giving them the right amount of like tally marks under their names. So they don't actually go out with having when they are already fouled out and they are still skating.
Yeah, or releasing someone too early or something like that.
Yes.
And as you're getting more comfortable in the box too, you'll start to kind of tune into, oh, there was a whistle. That wasn't lead whistle. That's a penalty. Someone's coming into the box. And usually box communication, anyone can kind of be like, oh, we have a white block or a black blocker coming in, or something like that, just especially if it gets a little hectic. So the timers can be aware that there's someone else they're going to have to pay attention to, either starting their stopwatch or what second they set down to be able to record it in the paperwork, depending on how they're handling that. And you can also sometimes then pick up when they have 2 penalties. You still need that confirmation from the inside. But if you're expecting it, you can kind of be waiting till the penalty tracker is looking up. You have the eye contact ready. You can confirm it easily. They can go back to their job, and you can focus on yours.
Cool. And it looks like we had a couple more questions around this. One of the questions was, are phone apps allowed to be used instead of stopwatches? If so, which app is recommended?
So
yeah, I wasn't gonna take this one.
Yeah, it's so that's kind of like a gray area. Like you could definitely use the phone app for during scrimmages. But most, like at least at Rose City, we always like trying to use our stopwatches. Especially if we have a full box, if we have like our 2 timers and our manager, we definitely want to be like, there's no real reason to be using a phone app. But if for whatever reason, if you are the only person who's going to be in the box for a game, that's something under the head NSO's discretion on if that should be fine. Definitely talk it before with your head NSO if you're going to do that for a game. But they're definitely fine for like during scrimmages, but like mostly stopwatches is what is used.
Yeah, I think that it's becoming more acceptable. So maybe we'll see more of that. Part of it is the perception. Like, you have a phone in the box and you're like staring at your phone and playing with your phone. You know, not that it matters too much, but kind of gives the impression that you might be, you know, checking Facebook or doing something like that instead of focusing on the job you're there to do. But again, it is becoming more acceptable. Scrimmages, you know, that's fine. I think everyone should at least try to learn the stopwatch because that's going to be more commonly available. If you're using it, couple tips: put it on airplane mode so you don't have notifications popping up. And I'm trying to remember, I don't know that I still have the app. I did for a while. I think it was called Penalty Box Timer, and it was purple, and I'm on iOS, and that's the only one
Yeah,
I
I have.
remember. I could customize what colors the teams were, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the one I have on my Android is just called Penalty Box Timer. Not everybody likes this particular version of it though, because there's a lot of different versions of like a Penalty Box Timer app. But I like it. You like what sMush was saying. You can customize the colors, and you can put it in like landscape or portrait mode, however you want it to be. I like it, but like everyone has their own preference. There's a lot of different versions of it online.
Awesome. Yeah, and it looks like Kat said the apps are allowed, but your phone must be in airplane mode. So that makes sense. Just less distractions while you're doing that job. There was another question here as well, which is, why does the penalty box paperwork show a team color at the top and also a column for team?
Because it's a little outdated. There's no real reason why it's there. It's just there. So you don't really have to fill out that column. But I just know, like, whenever I do stats books, I always like just enter in the initials on it, just so then that looks filled out and like complete. But because it is also on the top, you don't have to fill that part out.
Yeah, there are some redundancies, and I can't say the rationale for this one. I don't necessarily know if there is one. But sometimes, I mean, if you're writing it in, it's more likely that you're timing the correct team. But yeah, I don't think most people will just put the first letter of the color with awareness of what the other color is. It starts with the same letter. You might have to be a little bit more specific than, you know, if it was blue and black when you use something besides B. But they would just put the first letter and then like an arrow down, just a straight line down, because it's not changing. So you don't have to write it in each time. And something else I do is, like, I will pre-fill that column and the period column. I don't know how many penalties are going to be in that particular half, but it's probably going to be more than 6. So I probably generally go about 10 lines down, and then you can, you know, keep going if you need more space. I think I can't see with my screen share, but I think I saw some things pop up with that. If there's more questions here, otherwise I wanted to talk about the communication you might get from your box manager about jammers when there's a jammer swap. Do we have any other questions so far?
Yeah. Not yet, doesn't look like. So maybe we can move on to that.
Okay. Yeah, so with again, you're not timing the jammers, but you are recording your team's, you know, you're called the color you're responsible for. You're recording that jammer's information as well. And your box manager will tell you the amount of time that the jammer served. Generally, that's going to be 30 seconds. But if there's a jammer swap, that's when one jammer is in for a penalty and the other jammer comes in, and then one of those jammers is released, generally the first one, not always. The box time, the time is generally shortened unless it was perfectly timed, and so they'll be released before 30 seconds. So that's the idea of the jammer swap. Someone's served, you know, 10 seconds, the other jammer comes in, they get released, and they say, okay, they served 10 seconds, and then the other jammer also serves the 10 seconds. That's not your responsibility as a box timer to know how jammer swaps work, just that you might have, your box manager will be telling you how long the jammer served, especially when it's not the full 30. Let's see, does anyone, and I think, is that another question, or is my computer just jumping around?
Yep, it says, how about that next to the last column, jam number? How is that one used?
Yeah, so that one is to help you. You can keep track of the jams that way. So after jam 1 is over, you can cross it off, or when jam 2 starts, you can circle it, whatever makes sense to you. It has an added feature where if no one's been serving double penalties, they can also help you count the total number of penalties you've had so far, which is good to verify that your tally marks are correct. Just so happens that they're on the same, in the same cell, so they line up. So if you see jam number 9, and that's, if you have penalties up to jam number 9, that has nothing to do with the jam number, but you can at least, it's a little trick that you can show that, oh, there's 9 penalties unless there was a double somewhere. And then you can count your tallies and make sure that they match and you're not missing a tally somewhere. Otherwise, if you can see the scoreboard, that's generally what I go off of when I'm box timings, what the scoreboard says. If you're in a venue where you can't see the scoreboard, it's helpful if the box manager kind of calls out and keeps track of what jam number you're in at the start. But again, they don't have the paperwork and you do, so you can kind of help back them up there with that.
Awesome. And we have another question, which is, the next question is the time left section for penalties that carry over into the next jam?
Yeah, so that's going to be if, like in the jam 9 with the in-between mark, it looks like that the pivot 515 still has served 17 seconds before that the jam was called off. So in that column, you're just going to be writing down how much time they have served. So then we can make sure that the lineups match also with the penalty side. We'll make sure that, like, yes, this person was in this jam and also in this jam too, just in case if we're missing somebody, like on the lineups or somewhere we're missing something, so we have all this information at the ready.
Yeah, and to add on with kind of because we talked about paperwork and the scorekeeping paperwork and how it's important that everything matches and lines up and all of that, because it's entered into the stats book. The penalty box the whole paperwork is pretty much redundant in terms of what's needed in the stats book, at least. So a lot of the things here are to help you as the box timer. They are great for verification, like Doof was talking about, especially if there's some discrepancy on the paperwork after the game and we can't figure out what's going on based on what the lineup trackers or PLTs put down. Having an additional set of information to reference it is great. But especially as you're learning, it might not be helpful. So if you're starting and you're learning with 2 stopwatches, you have 2 seats, 2 stopwatches. Your box manager says, I'm going to pick up any third blockers come in, don't worry about it. You might not be recording the time at the end of the jam because you have it on your stopwatch, but when you're getting more proficient, you likely will be using it. It's useful. It also can save you if you accidentally clear the time for some reason on your stopwatch, how long they were in there for. And there's 3 boxes because sometimes there are very short jams and sometimes there are long penalties. So, it can carry over they can carry over a few jams. Okay. We're talking about it in detail on this slide, but I think, oh, no, that was the right slide. Okay. All right, I think we've covered pretty much all of paperwork and what you're going to be doing here. I
Yeah,
guess
go ahead.
I guess one more thing when we were talking about signaling when someone has 5 penalties or more, 5, 6, or 7. Something that I like that I've seen on paperwork that I think we do at least in this area is you'll see again on the right side that total penalty column that's pre-filled with the roster numbers. Just to the right of that, of making a slash with a positive slope. I don't know if that's forward or backwards because I write weird. For 5, and then the opposite direction, so you make an X for 6, and then up down the middle, that's 7. It also, sometimes box managers like that because it's another visual where they can kind of glance at your paperwork and see an X. They're like, oh, gotta pay attention if that skater comes in because I'll have to worry about a foul out. Other than that, I think that's it. Unless people have questions, then we can kind of maybe open it up broader beyond just paperwork and into NSOing and getting involved, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it looks like Kat was asking if you could talk more about what to say to skaters. And Kat, if I understand the question correctly, do you mean when they're supposed to stand, when they're supposed to exit the box, things like that? Yes.
Yeah, so with timing, you're always going to say color number stand and color number done. But with their numbers, you have to say each number individually. So like we have a 214, we have a 20, we have a 515. We want to make sure that we're saying each number individually, in case we have multiple peoples with like similar numbers that they're not hearing, like, oh, 36, that's me, kind of thing. And then as for hand signals, generally we don't want to be touching the skaters unless they're like a hard of hearing and they've given the okay about that earlier. So as long as you're like sticking your hand out, sign they're able to see like a visual of like raising your hand up and then saying done, of like in a way.
Yeah, so again, so they have 10 seconds left. That's when you do the stand with the hand signal. And then when they're done, color number done, and you're timing that done and you're timing that stand so that you are giving that last syllable right at, for stand, 20 seconds, and for done, generally 30 seconds, whenever their time has expired. So people talk about having long numbers and having to serve an extra second in a penalty box. It shouldn't be that way. You should be timing it so if they have a 4-digit number, you're going to start that a little bit earlier than you would a single-digit number. And so so just to reiterate that, most situations, someone's going to come in with 1 penalty and will serve 30 seconds. So in that situation, it's color number stand with the hand signal at 20 seconds. Then 10 seconds later at 30, it's color number done, and they are released. I think other weird situations along that would probably involve the box manager. If someone leaves early or doesn't do, well, we can talk about what you should do if they don't do what you say, but they leave early, just tell the box manager that, and that's something that they can handle. So technically, if you tell a skater to stand and they don't, or they're trying to be too sneaky and they're not touching the chair but they're hovering an inch off of it or something like that, why do we have skaters stand? Well, it might make it safer to leave the box, but it's also a good visual cue to everyone else that the skater only has 10 seconds remaining of their penalty and will therefore be coming on the track soon. So if someone's trying to gain a competitive advantage by hovering or not standing when they're supposed to, that's not allowed. It's not necessarily another penalty unless there's a weird situation for it. Instead, you repeat the verbal cue, and then if they don't stand at that point, you tell them that timing has stopped for color number. So they're then you stop your timer. So basically they're not serving their penalty time anymore. It's paused until they actually stand up. That does not happen very often. And again, if you're a newer NSO and your box manager knows that, they'll probably be looking out and be able to help you through that situation. Did we get some things are flashing on my screen? I still can't see. So.
A couple more questions here. One is, if the skater leaves early, stop your watch. Or I guess this is just a statement saying stop your watch if the skater leaves early. So that makes sense. I actually had a question as well, which is, if that does happen where the skater leaves the box early, is it the responsibility of the penalty box timers to call the skater back, or does that fall on the referees, or like where's the division of labor there?
So you would let your box manager know, being like, the skater left early, they need to finish 2 seconds of their time. It sucks, but they have to finish it. So then the box manager will then write on a whiteboard that they should have in their box area, and they will hold it up with the skater number written on it, and just like aggressively like be shaking it to try to get any ref's attention, or to get somebody's attention who's in the middle, be like, I need this person to come back immediately. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it has to go into the next jam, in which case then we'd be like, we need the skater to come back to serve the remaining time they have, and now an additional 30 seconds since they left the box and were in active play.
Yeah, and so the box manager will put up the penalty code, and if the skater realizes that they have a penalty after they've gone back, it's not an immediate, oops, it was a definite, they're gone, and then they somehow have to realize that they need to come back, and you're able to issue the penalty, you would then just put a circle around the penalty code. Otherwise, you don't circle it and hold it up. And the reason you're holding it up with the circle is to signal that you've already dealt with it. Like, this skater has an additional penalty, and your penalty tracker needs to know that, or your PLTs need to know that, and that's why you're signaling that piece of it. But the circle means that we're here, we're good, we've got it handled. But generally, for leaving the box early, you're not going to have that circle, and you're going to need a ref to flag them down and send them to the box.
Got it. So it looks like we have maybe just one or two more questions here to wrap up. From JP, they say, are you allowed to tell skaters if they have 2 penalties, time left, or other communication? Yeah,
so you can definitely, like if the skater comes in with 2, something skaters may not know that, and they might just be like looking at you, be like, I've been sitting here for like 23 seconds, why am I not standing? And that's when you can tell them, we're not supposed to be like initiating conversation with them. Like, skaters are supposed to be like, they can ask us questions and we can answer like simple yes, no, or however much time they have left questions, kind of thing.
Yeah, and so generally things about timing, about penalty counts, those are things that are safe to answer if you have the bandwidth to be able to, and if you know. So they might ask, how many penalties am I at? You can tell them. Or at the end of the jam, how many seconds do I have left? And you can tell them that. What penalty did I get? That's not really your job there. You can. But the number, anything that's kind of in your purview with timing and number of penalties, that's something you can share with the skaters if they're asking about it.
Awesome. Is there anything else you two wanted to cover on this slide of the presentation?
I think we covered what we wanted to cover. So I think the other thing left then is just how to kind of get involved. If you're at Rose City, Doof is the NSO trainer, so you can email them. Do that NSO at. I also put, there's also their individual email up there too. You can also email me. I'm happy to chat about things. If you know me, you can also just chat with me. If you're not at Rose and you're a member of another league, talk to whoever's handling your NSO training or your referee training or your official training, or show up to scrimmage with a stopwatch and see if you can volunteer to time penalties, because you've got that now.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and sMush and Doof, thank you so much for this awesome presentation. I feel like I learned things that even after 7 years of skating, I never somehow knew. So I definitely appreciate that. If anybody who attended tonight has any feedback on this, I would love to hear from you. If you're interested in some more of these sessions like this, you can feel free to reach out to me. My name is Meg. Again, you can find my contact info on rosecityrollers.com, or just email me, meg@rosecityrollers.com. And I'm super looking forward to having more fun Zoom sessions with all of y'all at some point in the future. So thank you.
All right.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.